A boy never came back from soccer practice until 14 years later, his coach confessed everything. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The red number 10 jersey hung in its frame on Lucia Torres's living room wall, a silent monument to absence. She stood before it, her fingers tracing the glass as if she could somehow reach through time and touch the fabric beneath. The raindrops pelting against the windows provided a rhythmic backdrop to her ritual of remembrance, 14 years strong and still sharp as a new wound. The sudden pounding on her front door startled her, the heavy blows almost indistinguishable from the thunder that had been rumbling all evening. Lucia pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, moving cautiously toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she made out a familiar sedan parked at the curb, its headlights cutting through the downpour. She hadn't seen that car in years, but she knew it instantly. Coach Whitaker's old Buick, now faded and rusted at the edges, just like its owner must be. Her heart hammered in her chest. For 14 years she had imagined this moment, rehearsed the words she would say, the questions she would demand answers to. Now that it was here, she felt paralyzed, her hand frozen on the curtain. Another round of knocking, more urgent this time. Lucia took a deep breath and moved to the door, her fingers trembling slightly as they wrapped around the handle. She paused, counting to 5 in her head, a technique she'd learned in grief counseling, before pulling it open. Coach James Whitaker stood on her porch, soaked to the bone. His once salt and pepper hair was now completely white, plastered to his skull by the rain. His dark gray suit hung heavily on his frame, water pooling at his feet on her welcome mat. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Bloodshot and haunted, darting nervously as if expecting someone to materialize behind her. "We need to talk about Michael," he said, his voice cracking over her son's name. 14 years of waiting, and just like that, her son's name fell from his lips as easily as rain from the clouds. Lucia gripped the doorframe, steadying herself. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, another part wanted to scream at him, demand where he'd been all these years when she was drowning in questions. Instead, she stepped aside silently, allowing him entry into her home. Whitaker moved past her with the hesitant steps of a man approaching a precipice. His hands trembled visibly, and Lucia noticed how he avoided looking at the framed jersey as he passed it. In her kitchen, Lucia set a mug of coffee before him, watching as he wrapped both hands around it as if drawing warmth from a campfire in midwinter. Steam rose between them, the only movement in a moment frozen by 14 years of silence. "You haven't been back to Riversend since it happened," Lucia said finally, her voice level despite the storm inside her. "Why now?" Whitaker stared into his coffee, unable to meet her eyes. "I should have come sooner. I should have..." He shook his head, droplets of water falling from his hair onto the table. "That last night when Michael..." The sudden glare of headlights swept across the kitchen walls as another car pulled into her driveway. Lucia moved to the window, peering out at the unmarked sedan that had parked behind Whitaker's Buick. "Are you expecting someone?" Whitaker asked, his voice tight with sudden anxiety. Before Lucia could answer, 3 sharp knocks cut through the house. She opened the front door to find Amanda Wilson standing on her porch, her police badge already extended in her hand. The girl who had once played midfield alongside Michael had grown into a strong-featured woman with determined eyes. "Mrs. Torres." Amanda nodded respectfully before her gaze hardened as it moved past Lucia to where Whitaker now stood in the hallway. "I didn't expect you'd come straight here, Coach." Whitaker's coffee mug slipped from his hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Amanda," he whispered, his face draining of what little color it had. "Detective Wilson now," Amanda corrected, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She closed the door behind her, her expression a professional mask that did little to hide the emotion underneath. 14 years is a long time to stay away, Coach. almost as long as it took us to find new evidence. Whitaker backed away, his eyes wild. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Amanda's hand moved subtly toward her hip, where Lucia glimpsed a holstered gun. We found something at the old soccer field during the excavation for the new community center extension. Whitaker's gaze darted toward the kitchen's back door. In a sudden movement that belied his age, he lunged for it, yanking it open and stumbling out into the rain. Stop! Amanda shouted, racing after him. Lucia followed them onto the back porch, rain immediately soaking through her thin sweater. She watched as Whitaker slipped on the wet wooden steps, falling hard onto the muddy ground below. Amanda was on him in seconds, her knee pressing into his back as she secured his wrists with handcuffs. James Whitaker, you're not under arrest yet, but I strongly suggest you start cooperating, Amanda said, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I didn't kill him, Whitaker sobbed into the mud. I swear to God I didn't kill Michael. Lucia felt her knees weaken at his words. After 14 years of silence, of not knowing, of imagining every possible scenario, to hear him speak of her son's death so plainly was like being struck by lightning. Back inside, Whitaker sat defeated on her sofa, his clothes plastered with mud and rain, his handcuffed wrists resting in his lap. Amanda stood guard, nearby while Lucia brought towels, her actions mechanical, driven by ingrained hospitality rather than compassion. Why did you come here tonight? Amanda asked, her tone professional but laced with personal anger. After all these years, why tonight? Whitaker looked up, his expression shifting from fear to something more complex. Because I couldn't live with it anymore. Not after what I saw 3 days ago. And what was that? Lucia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't come here to confess to a murder, Whitaker said, his words slow and deliberate. He looked directly at Lucia, his red-rimmed eyes holding hers. I came because I saw Michael alive 3 days ago. The room went completely still. Lucia felt as if all the air had been sucked out through the windows, leaving her lungs burning. Amanda's professional demeanor cracked, her jaw slack with disbelief. That's impossible, Amanda finally said. Michael disappeared 14 years ago. He would be 26 now. I know what I saw, Whitaker insisted, leaning forward. I was getting gas just outside Sacramento. He was there at the same station. Older, yes, but it was him. Those same eyes, that Torres jawline. He looked pleadingly at Lucia. You have to believe me. You expect us to believe that after 14 years of silence, you suddenly saw a ghost at a gas station? Amanda's voice dripped with skepticism. Not a ghost, Whitaker said, struggling against his handcuffs. I have proof. With awkward movements, he managed to reach into his inner jacket pocket. From it, he withdrew a folded, rain-dampened photograph, holding it out toward Lucia with trembling fingers. I took it with my phone before he drove away. I printed it out to bring to you. Lucia hesitated, her hands suspended in midair. Part of her wanted to snatch the photo, desperate for any glimpse, any connection to her son. Another part recoiled, protective against what might be another wound, another disappointment in 14 years of them. Take it, Whitaker urged. Look at his face, it's Michael, he's alive. Amanda watched intently as Lucia's fingers finally closed around the photograph. With a steadying breath, Lucia unfolded it, revealing the slightly blurred image of a young man at a gas pump. Dark hair, olive skin, a profile that made her heart stop for one breathless moment. It could be him, she whispered, her voice breaking. It could be what he would look like now. Amanda moved closer, studying the image over Lucia's shoulder. Her trained detective's eye narrowed, scanning for details, for inconsistencies, for truth. When exactly was this taken? She asked Whitaker sharply. What time? Did you speak to him? Did he see you? Whitaker shook his head. I was too shocked. By the time I gathered my courage, he was driving away. I followed for a few miles, but lost him on the highway. Lucia couldn't take her eyes off the photograph. The features were so familiar, yet different. Matured, hardened perhaps. Was this really her son? Somehow alive after all these years? Had he been living all this time, just hours away, while she marked the anniversary of his disappearance each year with candles and tears? "This doesn't make sense," Amanda said, her voice harder now. "We found DNA evidence at the old field, Coach. And it's not the first time something's been found there, is it?" Whitaker's face paled further. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," Amanda pressed. "The DNA we found doesn't match Michael's profile from his toothbrush in evidence storage. It matches Thomas Reynolds, who disappeared 2 years before Michael did." The name hung in the air like smoke. Lucia remembered Thomas, another boy from the soccer team, quiet and serious. His disappearance had been attributed to a runaway situation, his troubled home life, providing a convenient explanation that the town had readily accepted. A sudden flash of light through the window caught their attention. All three turned to see a figure ducking away from the glass, a man with a camera, the distinctive shape of a press badge hanging from his neck. "Damn vultures," Amanda muttered, moving quickly to the door. "They must have followed me from the station. Stay here." As Amanda rushed outside to confront the reporter, Lucia found herself alone with Whitaker. The photograph trembled in her hands as she stared at the man who had coached her son, who had attended his 13th birthday party, who had vanished from Riversend the same week Michael did. "Is this really him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Tell me the truth. After 14 years, don't I deserve that much?" Whitaker's shoulders slumped, defeat written in every line of his body. Tears leaked from his eyes, carving paths through the grime on his face. "Lucia, His voice caught. "The boy in that photo, he's not Michael." The hope that had flared briefly in Lucia's chest collapsed like a dying star. "Then why would you?" "Because he looks so much like him," Whitaker sobbed. "Because he's my son. My secret son with Diane Mendez." Lucia staggered backward, as if struck. Diane Mendez, the mother of another boy on the team, a woman who had moved away shortly after Michael's disappearance. "You cruel, cruel man," Lucia whispered, rage building inside her like a gathering storm. "You gave me hope. You made me think." With a sudden movement, she flung the photograph back at Whitaker, hitting him squarely in the face. She collapsed onto the sofa, her body shaking with 14 years of grief renewed in an instant. The front door slammed as Amanda returned, her face flushed with anger, clutching a confiscated camera. She took in the scene, Lucia's breakdown, Whitaker's tears, and her expression hardened further. "What happened?" she demanded. Before either could answer, Amanda grabbed Whitaker by his collar, yanking him forward until their faces were inches apart. Her voice emerged as cold and sharp as ice. "The DNA we found wasn't Michael's. It was Thomas Reynolds, who disappeared 2 years before him. And you were coach to both boys." Lucia's hands trembled as she took the photograph from Whitaker's unsteady grip. Time seemed to slow as she studied the face within the rain-spotted image. The same strong jawline, the familiar curve of the eyebrow, the way the corner of his mouth quirked slightly upward. It was like looking at a ghost, a vision of what Michael might have become. "He's alive?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the continuous drumming of rain against the windows. Amanda moved closer, peering over Lucia's shoulder with trained scrutiny. "Where exactly was this taken, Coach? Date, time, location, be specific." Whitaker shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, his handcuffed wrists making soft clinking sounds as he adjusted his position. 3 days ago, at a Shell station just off I-80 near Sacramento, around 7:30 in the evening. And you're certain it was Michael? Amanda pressed, her tone making it clear she harbored significant doubts. It had to be him, Whitaker insisted, though Lucia noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross his features. Same eyes, same Torres profile, just older. Lucia's fingertips traced the outline of the young man's face in the photograph. 14 years of imagining what her son might look like as he grew, from the missing 13-year-old to a high school graduate, a college student, a young man, had left her with a catalog of phantom Michaels that lived only in her mind. This image seemed to have stepped directly from those imaginings. Why didn't you approach him? Lucia asked suddenly, her eyes still fixed on the photograph. If you thought it was my son, why wouldn't you call out to him, speak to him? Whitaker's gaze fell to the floor. I was shocked. By the time I processed what I was seeing, he was already getting into his car. I followed for a few miles but lost him in traffic. Amanda made a small noise of disbelief. You followed, but didn't try to flag him down? Didn't call the police? Didn't immediately come to Mrs. Torres? Instead, you waited 3 days? I needed to be sure, Whitaker said weakly. I needed to. Lucia closed her eyes, letting the photograph fall to her lap as a memory washed over her. Michael, at 13, sitting at their kitchen table, his soccer uniform still on from morning practice, ketchup from his lunch smeared at the corner of his mouth. Mom, Coach says I have a natural talent. He thinks I could go all the way if I work hard enough. His eyes so bright with hope, with future. The red jersey fresh and new, the number 10 a badge of honor he'd earned. This doesn't make sense, Lucia said, opening her eyes to find both Amanda and Whitaker watching her. If Michael is alive, where has he been for 14 years? Why wouldn't he come home? Amanda placed a gentle hand on Lucia's shoulder. We need to approach this logically. The DNA evidence we found suggests... What exactly did you find? Lucia interrupted, suddenly desperate for concrete facts rather than Whitaker's dubious claims. Amanda hesitated, glancing briefly at Whitaker before responding. During the excavation for the community center expansion, workers uncovered what appeared to be human remains beneath part of the old soccer field. Preliminary testing indicates the DNA doesn't match Michael's profile from items we've kept in evidence. It matches Thomas Reynolds. Reynolds. Lucia repeated the name slowly. The boy who disappeared 2 years before Michael. Whitaker's face had gone deathly pale at the mention of Thomas Reynolds. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the chill in the room. I always thought that case was closed, Lucia continued, reaching for her phone. They said he ran away from home. Troubled family. Father with a drinking problem. She quickly searched for news articles about the Reynolds disappearance, finding only brief mentions buried in local news archives. It barely made the papers when he vanished. That's because certain people wanted it that way, Amanda said pointedly, her gaze fixed on Whitaker. Just like they wanted to keep the investigation into Michael's disappearance focused on runaway teen theories instead of looking closer to home. A sudden flash of light through the window interrupted them. A camera flash. Amanda moved quickly to the window, cursing under her breath, as she spotted a figure ducking behind the bushes in Lucia's front yard. Stay here, she ordered, drawing her service weapon and moving toward the door. Don't let him leave. As Amanda disappeared outside, Lucia found herself alone again with Whitaker. The rain-soaked coach seemed to have aged another decade in the past hour, his shoulders hunched forward, hands trembling visibly even in restraints. You've been lying to me for 14 years, Lucia said quietly, a dangerous calm settling over her. My son vanishes after soccer practice, and the next day so do you. The entire town speculated. Did you take him? Hurt him? Was it an accident you couldn't face? And now you show up on my doorstep with a photo of someone who isn't even Michael? Lucia, please. Don't you dare Lucia me, she hissed, rage finally breaking through her shock. "You owe me the truth. All of it. Now." Whitaker flinched at her intensity. "I panicked," he whispered. "After what happened, I couldn't face anyone, especially not you." "After what happened?" Lucia repeated, her voice rising. "What happened to my son?" Before Whitaker could answer, the sounds of a struggle erupted outside. Through the window, Lucia could see Amanda forcefully restraining a man against the hood of her car, the flash of a camera clattering to the wet pavement. "Stay there!" she called to Whitaker, rushing to the door. Outside, Amanda had the reporter pinned, her knee in his back as she secured his wrists with plastic zip ties. "Press freedom!" the man was shouting indignantly. "This is assault on the media. This is trespassing, an invasion of privacy during an active investigation," Amanda countered, removing memory cards from his camera. "You'll get your equipment back after we've reviewed the contents." Lucia stood on the porch, the rain now falling in a gentle mist that clung to her hair and clothes. "Who sent you?" she demanded of the reporter. "How did you know to be here tonight?" "Got an anonymous tip," the man replied, grimacing as Amanda pulled him to his feet. "Said something big was breaking in the Michael Torres case. First outlet to run with it gets the exclusive." Amanda and Lucia exchanged alarmed glances. Someone knew Whitaker was here, knew what was happening. "I'm going to secure him in my car," Amanda said quietly to Lucia. "Then we continue our conversation with the coach. Don't let him out of your sight." Lucia nodded, turning back toward the house. Through the window, she could see Whitaker still sitting on the sofa, head bowed. Something about his posture struck her as off, more defeated than before, almost. Resigned. Stepping back inside, she approached him cautiously. "Amanda is securing the reporter. She'll be back in a moment." Whitaker didn't respond immediately. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said, his voice breaking. "You have to believe that." "What I believe," Lucia replied coldly, "is that you've been hiding something for 14 years, and that you're still hiding it." Whitaker's shoulders sagged further. "The boy in the photo," he said quietly, "isn't Michael." Though she had already begun to suspect as much, hearing the confirmation was like a physical blow. Lucia steadied herself against the wall, fighting to keep her composure. "Then why show it to me? Why give me hope like that?" "Because he looks like him," Whitaker admitted, tears flowing freely now. "Because every time I see him, I'm reminded of what happened. Of what I did. Of what I couldn't prevent." Lucia's hand clenched into a fist at her side. "Who is he?" Whitaker's response was almost inaudible. "My son." "What?" Lucia took a step closer, certain she had misheard. "He's my son," Whitaker repeated, louder this time. "With Diane Mendez." The name hit Lucia like a bucket of ice water. Diane Mendez, mother of Carlos Mendez, one of Michael's teammates. A woman who had vanished from Riversend shortly after Michael's disappearance, ostensibly to care for an ailing parent in California. "You had an affair with a player's mother?" Lucia's voice rose with incredulity and disgust. "And you have a son who, what, just happens to look like Michael?" Whitaker nodded miserably. "He was born 8 months after Diane left town. I only found out he existed 5 years ago when she contacted me for money. He's about the same age now that Michael would be. The resemblance is striking." Fury like Lucia had never known surged through her. She crossed the room in 2 quick strides and slapped Whitaker hard across the face, the sound cracking through the quiet house like lightning. "You cruel, manipulative monster," she spat, trembling with rage. "You let me believe even for a moment that my son might be alive. You let me hope." Her voice broke on the last word, 14 years of grief crashing over her anew. The front door opened as Amanda returned, her expression shifting quickly from professional detachment to concern as she took in the scene. Lucia standing over Whitaker, hand still raised, both of them in tears. "What happened?" Amanda demanded, moving quickly to Lucia's side. "Ask him," Lucia said bitterly, thrusting the photograph at Amanda. "Ask him who this really is." Amanda looked from the photo to Whitaker, whose cheek bore the red imprint of Lucia's hand. "Explain," she commanded. "It's my son," Whitaker confessed, not meeting her eyes. "With Diane Mendez. I showed it to Mrs. Torres because of the resemblance. I thought seeing someone who looked like Michael might help me explain what really happened that night." "By giving her false hope?" Amanda's voice was laden with disgust. "By making her believe her son might be alive before telling her the truth about how he died?" The room went utterly still at Amanda's words. Lucia felt her legs give way beneath her, sinking onto the coffee table across from Whitaker. "So he is dead," she whispered, the last fragile thread of hope severing inside her. Whitaker said nothing, his silence more damning than any confession. Amanda moved to the sofa, grabbing Whitaker's collar and pulling him forward until their faces were inches apart. Her voice emerged glacial and precise. "The DNA we found wasn't Michael's. It was Thomas Reynolds, who disappeared 2 years before him, and you were coach to both boys." Whitaker's face crumpled at the mention of Thomas Reynolds, as if a second specter had materialized in the room to haunt him. The name hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Thomas Reynolds," Amanda repeated, her grip still tight on Whitaker's collar. "A 15-year-old boy who supposedly ran away from home, but whose DNA we just found buried in the old soccer field. The same field where Michael practiced, the same team you coached." Lucia felt a chill course through her that had nothing to do with her rain-dampened clothes. She remembered Thomas, a quiet, serious boy with watchful eyes and quick feet on the field. His disappearance had barely caused a ripple in River's End, chalked up to a troubled home life and a father with a drinking problem. Unlike the weeks of searches and media attention that followed Michael's vanishing 2 years later. "2 boys," Lucia whispered. "2 boys from the same team. Both gone." Amanda released Whitaker's collar, causing him to slump back against the sofa. She moved to the dining table, methodically removing items from a folder she'd brought with her. One by one, she laid out photographs of Thomas Reynolds, school pictures, team photos, family snapshots, alongside similar images of Michael. The parallels were unsettling. Both talented players, both with dark hair and serious expressions, both vanished without a trace. "I didn't kill that boy," Whitaker said, his voice barely audible. "Thomas was... That wasn't supposed to happen." "What wasn't supposed to happen?" Amanda pressed, turning back to face him. "The murder or the cover-up?" Whitaker began to pace in small, confined circles, his handcuffed wrists limiting his movement. He muttered fragments under his breath. Systems and loyalties, and words Lucia couldn't quite catch. "Coach," Amanda said sharply, "I need you to focus. What happened to Thomas Reynolds, and what does it have to do with Michael?" Lucia pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she typed Thomas's name into a search engine. News articles from 14 years ago appeared, but they were sparse and brief. "Missing teen believed to have run away," read one headline. "Police end search for Reynolds' boy," announced another, dated barely 2 weeks after his disappearance. "They barely looked for him," Lucia said, scrolling through the meager results. "It's like the whole town just accepted that he ran away." "Because that's what they were told to accept," Whitaker said, stopping his pacing to look at them both with haunted eyes. "The system protected itself. It always does." Amanda stepped away briefly, making a quick call to the police station. Her voice was low but urgent as she requested all available information on the Reynolds case be sent to her immediately. Meanwhile, Lucia moved to a bookshelf in the corner, pulling down a large album bound in faded blue fabric. She hadn't looked at these photos in years. The pain was too acute. But now she flipped through the pages with purpose. "Here," she said finally, her finger landing on a team photograph from 2 years before Michael disappeared. 20. Boys in red jerseys, arranged in 2 rows with Coach Whitaker standing proudly at the end. Michael, third from left in the front row, and Thomas, her finger moved to a solemn-faced boy in the back row, 5th from the right. Amanda examined the photograph over Lucia's shoulder. They weren't just on the same team at different times. They played together before Thomas disappeared. Whitaker had sunk to his knees in the middle of the living room, rocking slightly back and forth. "I never meant for any of this," he mumbled. "You have to believe me. It wasn't supposed to be like this." His breakdown was sudden and complete, the composed facade cracking like thin ice, revealing the depths of torment beneath. Sobs racked his body as he curled forward, touching his forehead to the carpet. "I'm sorry," he wept. "I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Please, God, forgive me." Amanda approached him cautiously, as one might a wounded animal. She unclipped a pair of handcuffs from her belt. "James Whitaker, I'm officially detaining you for questioning in connection with the disappearances of Thomas Reynolds and Michael Torres." She recited his rights in a clear, steady voice as she secured the cuffs around his wrists. Whitaker offered no resistance, continuing to mumble pleas for forgiveness through his tears. With Whitaker secured, Amanda turned to Lucia. "I need to call this in. The department will send officers to transport him to the station for formal questioning." As Amanda stepped away to make the call, Lucia approached Whitaker, kneeling beside his crumpled form. 14 years of imagining this confrontation, and now that it was here, she felt hollow. "Did you kill my son?" she asked directly, her voice remarkably steady. "Did you kill Thomas Reynolds?" Whitaker raised his tear-streaked face. "No," he said firmly, the first clear word he'd spoken since his breakdown began. "I swear on my life, I never killed those boys." "Then who did?" Lucia demanded. "What happened? To them?" Before Whitaker could answer, a knock at the front door interrupted them. Amanda, returning from her call, moved to answer it. A middle-aged woman with graying hair stood on the porch, concern etched on her face. "I heard shouting," she explained. "Is everything all right, Lucia? Should I call someone?" "It's fine, Mrs. Parker," Amanda said smoothly, her body positioned to block the neighbor's view of Whitaker on the floor. "I'm Detective Wilson. We were just discussing a case. Thank you for your concern." After a moment's hesitation, the neighbor nodded and retreated, though her worried glance suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Amanda closed the door and turned back to Lucia and Whitaker. "Backup will be here in 20 minutes. In the meantime, Coach, I think it's time you told us exactly what you know about Michael's whereabouts." Whitaker had regained some composure, though he remained on his knees. "The old oak tree," he murmured. "At the field. We buried him there." Lucia felt the room tilt around her. After 14 years of uncertainty, of desperate hope alternating with dreaded acceptance, to hear the confirmation of her worst fears stated so baldly was overwhelming. She gripped the arm of the sofa to steady herself. "Who is we?" Amanda demanded, kneeling to Whitaker's level. "Who helped you?" Whitaker shook his head. "I can take you there. I can show you where he is, but you need to understand it wasn't murder. It was an accident. And then it was protection." "Protection of whom?" Lucia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The system," Whitaker replied cryptically. "The whole system. It was bigger than any of us." Amanda exchanged a glance with Lucia. "We need to go to the field," she said. "Tonight, before anyone else finds out what's happening. If what he's saying is true, there could be evidence that's been there for 14 years. Lucia nodded, moving automatically to retrieve her jacket from the hook by the door. The red number 10 jersey caught her eye as she passed, and on impulse, she removed it from the frame, clutching it tightly to her chest. "I'm coming with you," she said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Amanda hesitated briefly before nodding. "We'll take my car. He'll ride in the back." They helped Whitaker to his feet. Despite his earlier breakdown, he seemed calmer now, as if the prospect of finally revealing the truth had lifted some weight from him. As they prepared to leave, Lucia's gaze fell on the rain-spattered photograph Whitaker had brought, the image of his secret son with Diane Mendez, the boy who looked so much like Michael might have at 26. She left it on the coffee table, face down. Some ghosts were best left behind. The drive to the old soccer field was tense with unspoken questions. Whitaker directed them from the back seat, his voice dispassionate now, as if he were merely giving directions to a restaurant, rather than the site where a child had been buried. "There," he said, as Amanda's headlights illuminated the field's edge. "The oak at the north corner, by the two big roots that stick up." Amanda parked on the service road that ran alongside the field. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle, and the ground squelched beneath their feet as they made their way across the muddy expanse. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, eventually landing on the gnarled oak that stood sentry at the field's corner. The tree was ancient, its massive trunk splitting into two main branches that reached like arthritic fingers into the night sky. Years of erosion had exposed some of its roots, creating a network of twisted wood emerging from the earth. "Here," Whitaker said, dropping to his knees between two particularly prominent roots. "We dug here that night." Amanda retrieved a small folding shovel from her car's emergency kit. "Step back," she instructed Whitaker, before beginning to dig in the soft, rain-soaked earth. Lucia stood, transfixed, the red jersey clutched tightly in her hands, as Amanda's shovel bit into the soil again and again. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the wet sounds of digging. Then a dull thud as metal struck something other than earth. Amanda dropped to her knees, using her gloved hands to clear away more soil. Slowly a piece of fabric emerged, red and white, muddied and degraded by time, but still recognizable as part of a soccer uniform. "Michael," Lucia whispered, falling to her knees beside Amanda. With gentle care, Amanda extracted the fabric from the earth, fragments of what had once been a soccer jersey. The number was no longer visible, destroyed by 14 years in the soil, but Lucia knew in her heart this had been her son's. "There's something else," Amanda said, reaching deeper into the hole. She pulled out a small, tarnished metal object, a medallion on a broken chain. Lucia took it with trembling fingers, using the edge of her sleeve to wipe away the dirt. "Saint Sebastian," she said softly. "The patron saint of athletes. I gave this to him for his 13th birthday." But as Amanda continued to dig, carefully widening and deepening the hole, a troubling reality became clear. There were no human remains, only the fragments of uniform and the medallion. "Where is he?" Lucia demanded, turning to Whitaker with renewed fury. "Where is my son's body?" Whitaker's face had gone ashen. "It should be here," he insisted, panic rising in his voice. "We buried him right here, that night, I swear it." "Then why isn't he here?" Amanda pressed, her flashlight beam illuminating Whitaker's terrified expression. "They must have moved him," Whitaker said, his eyes wild with fear. "They must have come back and moved the body." "Who?" Amanda demanded. "Who would have moved him?" Whitaker shook his head frantically. I can't tell you that. They'll kill me. They'll kill us all." Lucia felt rage boil up inside her. 14 years of not knowing, and now this, a cruel extension of her torment. "You tell me who took my son," she hissed, advancing on Whitaker. "You tell me now." Amanda stepped between them, her expression grim. "Lucia, wait. There's something else here." She knelt again by the excavation, her flashlight illuminating something metallic at the bottom of the hole. Carefully she extracted it, a small, mud-encrusted badge. As Amanda cleaned it with her thumb, the emblem became visible in the flashlight's beam, the official seal of Riversend City Hall. "He won't be alone there," Whitaker murmured, staring into the empty grave with haunted eyes. He never was. Amanda's car cut through the night, headlights illuminating the empty road stretching before them. The storm had subsided to a misty drizzle that clung to the windshield until the wipers swept it away in rhythmic arcs. Lucia sat rigid in the passenger seat. Michael's framed jersey clutched tightly against her chest, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. In the back seat, Whitaker murmured incoherently, his handcuffed wrists rattling whenever they hit a bump. "The field was sacred before it became a grave," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine and the soft patter of rain. "We never meant for it to become a cemetery." Amanda's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, watching him with a detective's calculated suspicion. "Who's we, Coach? You keep saying we buried him, we did this. Who else was involved?" Whitaker didn't respond directly, his gaze distant as he stared out the rain-streaked window. "They'll kill me for talking. They've protected this secret for 14 years. Lucia hadn't spoken since they'd left her house. The confirmation that Michael was dead, buried like garbage beneath a tree, had hollowed her out. Yet somehow having this horrible truth was better than the endless not knowing that had haunted her for 14 years. At least until they'd discovered the empty grave. Now she was adrift again, the ground beneath her feet uncertain. Suddenly, without warning, Whitaker lunged toward the door handle, his handcuffed hands awkwardly struggling with the lock. "Stop!" Amanda shouted, the car swerving dangerously as she reached back with one hand to grab his arm. Lucia was jolted from her trance as the car veered toward the shoulder. She twisted in her seat, reaching back to help restrain Whitaker as he fought to open the door of the moving vehicle. "I can't do this," he screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I can't face what comes next." Amanda jerked the wheel, pulling the car sharply onto the shoulder. The tires skidded on the wet pavement before coming to an abrupt stop. In an instant, she was out of the driver's seat and yanking open the rear door, physically restraining Whitaker as he continued to struggle. "James Whitaker, you do not get to escape this," she said through gritted teeth, pushing him back into the seat. "Not after 14 years. Not after what you've done to Lucia, to Michael, to Thomas." Lucia exited the car, still clutching the jersey, and moved to help Amanda. Between the two of them, they managed to subdue Whitaker, whose burst of desperate energy quickly gave way to resigned sobbing. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he repeated, his mantra of absolution. "It was an accident. Michael's death was an accident. But the cover-up wasn't," Amanda replied coldly. "And what about Thomas Reynolds? Was that an accident too?" Whitaker's silence was damning. After ensuring he was secure, they continued the drive to the old soccer field. The darkness seemed to deepen as they approached, as if the night itself were conspiring to keep its secrets. Amanda's headlights swept across the partially abandoned field, now bordered on one side by construction tapumes where the community center expansion had begun. The car's tires crunched on gravel as Amanda pulled onto the service road that ran alongside the field. She killed the engine, but left the headlights on, illuminating a portion of the muddy expanse before them. "There," Whitaker said, pointing through the windshield at a solitary oak tree standing in the corner of the field. "The old oak. That's where we buried him." The three of them made their way across the sodden field, their footsteps leaving deep impressions in the mud. Amanda's flashlight beam bounced ahead of them, finally settling on the massive tree. Its ancient trunk split into two main branches that reached toward the cloudy night sky like beseeching arms. Years of erosion had exposed its root system, creating a tangled web of wooden snakes emerging from the earth. "Between those two roots," Whitaker indicated, dropping to his knees in the mud. "We dug there that night. It was raining then too, just like tonight." Amanda opened her trunk, retrieving a small, folding emergency shovel. She approached the spot Whitaker had indicated, her expression grim but determined. "Step back," she instructed him, then began to dig. Lucia stood frozen, watching as Amanda's shovel bit into the earth again and again. Each thud of metal against soil echoed in her chest like a second heartbeat. The red jersey in her hands felt impossibly heavy, as if it contained all the weight of 14 years of grief. Minutes stretched like hours as Amanda continued to dig, the hole growing deeper. Finally, the shovel struck something with a different sound. Not the dull thud of earth, but the distinctive sound of metal hitting fabric. Amanda dropped to her knees, setting aside the shovel to continue with her gloved hands. Carefully, she brushed away soil to reveal a scrap of red and white fabric, degraded by time and elements, but still recognizable. "Michael," Lucia whispered, falling to her knees beside the hole. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward the fabric, what remained of her son's uniform after 14 years in the ground. Amanda gently extracted the material, laying it carefully on the ground beside them. More digging revealed another piece, then another, fragments of what had once been a soccer jersey. The number was no longer visible, the fabric too degraded to maintain such details, but Lucia didn't need to see it to know this had been her son's number 10. "There's something else," Amanda said, reaching deeper into the excavation. Her fingers closed around a small object, which she carefully extracted from the mud. It was a medallion on a broken chain, caked with dirt but still intact. Lucia took it with shaking hands, using the edge of her sleeve to clean away the grime. "Saint Sebastian," she whispered, tracing the embossed figure of the martyred saint. "The patron saint of athletes. I gave this to him on his 13th birthday, just a month before." Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Amanda continued digging, widening and deepening the hole methodically. As time passed and more earth was removed, a disturbing reality became clear. There were no human remains, just fragments of the uniform and the medallion. "Where is he?" Lucia asked, her voice rising with renewed anguish. She turned to Whitaker. "Where is my son's body?" Whitaker's face had gone completely white, his eyes wide with genuine shock. It should be here," he stammered. "We buried him right here that night, I swear it." "Then why isn't he here?" Amanda demanded, her flashlight beam directed at Whitaker's face, highlighting his expression of panic. "They must have moved him," Whitaker said, looking wildly between Amanda and Lucia. "They must have come back later and moved the body." "Who?" Amanda pressed, moving closer to him. "Who would have moved him?" "I can't tell you that," Whitaker insisted, shrinking back. "They'll kill me if I tell you. They'll kill us all." Lucia felt rage rise within her like a physical force. She lunged forward, grabbing Whitaker by his jacket collar. "Tell me who took my son!" she shouted, shaking him with strength born of fury and grief. "Tell me now." "Lucia, wait," Amanda said sharply, pulling her back. "There's something else in the hole." She knelt again by the excavation, directing her flashlight beam toward the bottom. Something metallic glinted in the light. Carefully, she reached down and extracted a small object caked in mud. Using her thumb, Amanda cleaned away enough dirt to reveal what it was. A badge, its emblem partially visible beneath the grime. As she cleaned it further, the seal of Riversend City Hall emerged. "What is this?" she asked, holding it up to Whitaker. "Why would a City Hall badge be buried with Michael?" Whitaker stared at the badge, his expression shifting from fear to resignation. "Because they helped," he whispered. "They helped cover it up. They helped bury him." "Who exactly is they?" Amanda demanded. Before Whitaker could answer, a set of headlights swept across the field as a vehicle turned onto the service road, illuminating the three figures kneeling in the mud beside the excavated hole. "Get back to the car," Amanda ordered, helping Lucia to her feet. "Now!" They hurried across the field, Whitaker stumbling between them, heading for Amanda's vehicle. Behind them, the approaching car's high beams caught them in their glare, casting long shadows ahead of them on the muddy ground. "Who is that?" Lucia asked, clutching the fragments of Michael's uniform and the medallion to her chest alongside the framed jersey. "I don't know," Amanda replied tersely, her hand moving instinctively to her holstered weapon. "But I'm not taking chances." They reached her car just as the other vehicle pulled to a stop several yards away. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out, silhouetted in the headlights. "Detective Wilson," called a familiar voice. "I received a report of suspicious activity at the old field. Mind telling me what you're doing out here with a suspect in custody and a civilian?" Chief Matthews stepped into view, his expression hard to read in the darkness between the opposing headlights. "Following a lead, Chief," Amanda answered carefully. "Whitaker has provided information relevant to the Torres and Reynolds cases." "I see," Matthews replied, his tone neutral, but his posture tense. "And did you find anything of interest?" Amanda hesitated, her hand still near her weapon. Lucia could see her weighing her words carefully. "Just confirming some details of Whitaker's statement," she said finally. The police chief nodded slowly, his gaze moving to the obvious excavation site by the oak tree, clearly visible in the crossed beams of the headlights. "I'll need you to step away from that area," he said. "That's part of the construction zone for the community center expansion. You need permits to dig there." "We have reason to believe it's a crime scene," Amanda countered. "Without a warrant, you're trespassing and tampering with city property," Matthews replied. His hand moved to his radio. "I'm calling in a team to secure this area until the proper paperwork is filed." As Amanda and the chief continued their tense exchange, Lucia noticed Whitaker staring fixedly at the badge Amanda had found, still held loosely in her left hand. His lips moved silently, forming what looked like a name. Lucia leaned closer, trying to catch his whispered words. "Mayor Wilson," he breathed, so quietly only she could hear. "Your father knew everything, Amanda. He was there that night." While Amanda examined more carefully inside the hole with her flashlight, its beam revealed something metallic beside the degraded uniform, a partially buried badge with the emblem of the City Hall. The City Hall badge lay on the evidence table, its mud-caked surface partially cleaned to reveal the official seal of Riversend. Beside it rested the fragments of Michael's uniform and the St. Sebastian medallion, carefully arranged as if the tattered remains could somehow reconstitute the boy they once belonged to. Lucia stared at these, pitiful artifacts under the harsh fluorescent lighting of the police station. Each item, a confirmation that her son was gone, yet offering no closure about where his remains now lay. Amanda paced the small conference room, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in hushed, urgent tones to someone at the forensics lab. She ended the call and turned to Lucia, her expression grim. "The badge is from the administration of Mayor Wilson, circa 14 years ago," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Lucia looked up sharply. "Wilson, as in, my father," Amanda confirmed, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Richard Wilson was mayor when Michael disappeared." A heavy silence fell between them. Lucia studied Amanda's face, seeing for the first time the personal stake the detective had in this investigation. It explained her dogged pursuit of the case, her reluctance to let it go despite pressure from above. "That's why you've been so invested in finding the truth," Lucia said softly. "It wasn't just because you knew Michael." Amanda nodded, her jaw tight. "I've had questions for years. Dad changed after Michael disappeared, became distant, started drinking heavily. My mother left him 2 years later. He's never been the same." Outside the conference room, they could see Whitaker through the glass window of the interrogation room, sitting alone at a metal table, staring vacantly at the wall. "What do we do now?" Lucia asked, her fingers absently tracing the outline of the medallion. "We question him properly," Amanda replied, gathering the evidence into a clear plastic container. And we find out exactly who they are. As they entered the interrogation room, Whitaker didn't look up. His hands, now free of handcuffs but marked with their pressure, lay flat on the table before him. "Coach," Amanda began, setting the container down with deliberate care. "It's time to tell us everything." She placed the badge directly in front of him. "This belonged to someone at City Hall 14 years ago, during my father's administration. Who was at the field that night with you?" Whitaker stared at the badge, then closed his eyes in defeat. "There were people betting on the games," he said, his voice hollow. "Not just local games, the whole youth league. Serious money. Gambling on children's soccer?" Lucia's disgust was palpable. "It started small," Whitaker continued. "A few businessmen making friendly wagers. Then it grew, spread to other towns, became organized. The payouts got bigger and they needed insurance. They were fixing matches," Amanda said, the pieces falling into place. Whitaker nodded. "They approached me about 3 years before Michael disappeared. Offered me money to influence game outcomes. Which players to start, when to make substitutions, creating injuries through overtraining certain kids." Lucia felt bile rise in her throat. "And you agreed? You used children like pawns?" "I had debts," Whitaker replied, his shame evident. "My wife was sick, the medical bills. It seemed like an answer to prayer at first." "What happened with Michael?" Amanda pressed, keeping them on track. Whitaker's gaze drifted to the framed jersey that Lucia had placed on the table. Michael was smart, observant. He noticed things. Players being played out of position, strange calls, the same businessmen always at games. One day after practice, he confronted me in the locker room. A memory flashed in Lucia's mind. Michael at the breakfast table that last week, unusually quiet, picking at his food. When she'd asked what was bothering him, he just shrugged and said, "Some stuff at soccer. I need to talk to Coach about something important." "He found evidence," Whitaker continued, "a notebook where I kept track of the arrangements. He threatened to tell his parents, the school board, anyone who would listen." "So you killed him?" Amanda's voice was steel. "No!" Whitaker looked up, anguished. "It was an accident. We argued. I tried to grab the notebook from him. He pulled away, stumbled backward, hit his head on the corner of a bench. There was so much blood." Lucia felt her knees weaken, imagining her son's final moments, scared, betrayed by his coach, dying alone in a locker room. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "Who did you call?" Amanda asked, her tone softening slightly. "Principal Parker. He was involved. He called someone at City Hall. Within an hour, there were people there, cleaning up, telling me what to say, what to do." Whitaker ran his trembling hands through his hair. "We took his body to the field that night. We buried him under the oak." "And Thomas Reynolds?" Amanda placed a photo of the other missing boy on the table. "Was he an accident too?" Whitaker's face contorted with fresh pain. "Thomas discovered the betting scheme 2 years earlier. He was blackmailing some of the men involved. They decided to handle it." "Who?" Lucia demanded, her grief temporarily eclipsed by rage. "Who killed that boy?" Before Whitaker could answer, the door to the interrogation room opened. A young officer stood there, looking uncomfortable. "Detective Wilson? Mayor Clayton is in the reception area. He's demanding to speak with you about the Torres case." Amanda's expression hardened. "Tell him I'll be out shortly." After the officer left, she turned back to Whitaker. "You mentioned businessmen. Names now." "Vincent Clayton," Whitaker whispered. "He wasn't mayor then, just a real estate developer. Judge Devlin. A few others." "And my father?" Amanda asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Wilson knew about the betting. He didn't participate, but after Michael, after the accident, they involved him in the cover-up. Used him to keep the police investigation focused away from the team. Away from me. Lucia stared at the fragments of her son's uniform. And now Michael's body is missing. They moved him. Why? 5 years after Michael disappeared, they built the new community center, Amanda said slowly. The construction would have involved excavating parts of the old field. Whitaker nodded miserably. I heard rumors they found something during the initial groundbreaking. The construction was halted for 2 days. No explanation given. A terrible realization dawned on Lucia. They built over him, she whispered. They buried my son under their precious center. Amanda's phone rang, breaking the tense silence. She stepped out to take the call, returning moments later with renewed purpose. The forensics team found blood residue on the uniform fragments, she informed them, and I've requested the original construction permits and plans for the community center. You won't find anything irregular in those, Whitaker said. They would have covered their tracks. Maybe, Amanda conceded, but I've also pulled the donor list for the center's construction fund. Guess who the top 5 contributors were? She handed Lucia a printout. The names jumped off the page. Clayton Development Corp., Devlin Family Foundation, and 3 other businesses Whitaker had just implicated. They built a community center over my son's grave, then put their names on plaques as if they were heroes, Lucia said, her voice shaking with fury. Amanda studied the list more carefully. The same names keep appearing in both places, the betting scheme suspects and the center's major donors. It's like they laundered their guilt through charitable giving. Whitaker stared down at his hands. They'll never let you dig up the center. They have too much power in this town. We'll see about that, Amanda replied, gathering the evidence. I'm going to speak with Mayor Clayton now. You, she pointed at Whitaker, aren't going anywhere until we have a formal statement about both boys. Lucia followed Amanda into the hallway. What about your father? She asked quietly. If he was involved in the cover-up, Amanda's professional mask slipped, momentarily, revealing the pain beneath. If he was involved, he'll face justice like everyone else. I won't protect him. As they approached the reception area, they could hear Mayor Clayton's voice, imperious and demanding. Amanda straightened her shoulders, preparing for the confrontation. A young officer hurried toward them, his expression anxious. Detective Wilson, we just received a judicial order to cease and desist any excavation at the old field or the community center. It cites potential damage to city property and lack of proper permits. Who signed it? Amanda asked, though she already suspected the answer. Judge Marcus Devlin, the officer replied, handing her the document. The same judge who cut the ribbon at the community center dedication 5 years ago. Amanda emerged from the meeting room, her face a rigid mask of professional composure that barely contained the storm beneath. Chief Matthews and Mayor Clayton had spent the last 30 minutes attempting to derail her investigation with bureaucratic obstacles and thinly veiled threats. Words like overstepping, career suicide, and family legacy still rang in her ears. Lucia waited in the corridor, immediately reading the outcome on Amanda's face. Not good? They're shutting us down, Amanda confirmed, guiding Lucia toward the break room where they could speak privately. Officially, I've been removed from the case due to conflict of interest given my father's mayoral connection to the original investigation. The police station's coffee machine gurgled as Amanda poured 2 cups of the burnt-smelling liquid, more for something to do with her hands than any desire to drink it. She slid one across to Lucia, who wrapped her fingers around it but didn't lift it to her lips. So that's it? 14 years and they can just stop the truth from coming out? Lucia asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. That's what they think, Amanda replied, her tone low and determined. She glanced around to ensure they were alone. But they don't know what we found at the oak tree, and they don't know what Whitaker has already told us. We have options, Lucia. The older woman's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Channel 7 News, with a number she didn't recognize. Lucia showed it to Amanda before declining the call. "That's the third reporter today," she said. "Someone leaked that Whitaker was brought in for questioning about Michael." Amanda frowned. "They're trying to control the narrative. If they can't bury the story completely, they'll shape it to their advantage." She hesitated before adding, "We need allies, people who might know things but have been too afraid to come forward." Lucia nodded, already thinking. "Elena Martinez. Her son Carlos played on the team with Michael. He mentioned something about betting once, but when I asked more questions, Elena shut the conversation down, said Carlos was mistaken." 20 minutes later, Lucia pulled into Elena's driveway in the modest east side of Riversend. The small ranch-style home showed signs of careful maintenance despite limited means. Potted geraniums lined the walkway, and the lawn was neatly trimmed. Lucia had not spoken to Elena in nearly a decade, their shared grief creating an uncomfortable barrier rather than a bond. Elena answered the door on the second knock, surprise registering on her face. "Lucia? What are you?" Her eyes darted past Lucia to the street, as if checking who might be watching. "I need to talk to you about the team," Lucia said simply. "About what Carlos might have known." Elena's expression shuddered instantly. "Carlos doesn't live here anymore. He's in Seattle now." "This isn't about Carlos, not really," Lucia pressed. "It's about Michael and Thomas Reynolds and the betting." At the mention of betting, Elena's composure cracked. She glanced nervously over her shoulder before stepping aside. 10 minutes, that's all." Inside, the home smelled of cilantro and lime, remnants of a recent meal. Framed photos of Carlos at various ages lined the walls, including one of the soccer team, Michael among them, their young faces untroubled by the darkness that would soon envelop them. "They're reopening the case," Lucia explained, settling on a worn sofa. "Whitaker is talking." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. "I can't get involved in this, Lucia. I have a life here, a job at the school, grandchildren nearby. My son is buried somewhere, and people in power have covered it up for 14 years. Lucia replied, her voice steady but intense. "I just need to know what Carlos told you." Elena hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she sighed. "It wasn't much, just bits and pieces. Carlos mentioned that some men would talk to Whitaker after games. Once he overheard them discussing spreads and sure things. When Carlos started getting more playing time despite not being the strongest player, he wondered if something strange was happening." "Did he mention any names? Clayton? Devlin?" Elena nodded reluctantly. "Clayton attended most games. He had no children on the team, but he was always there. Always watching. Always with his little notebook." "Why didn't you say anything back then?" "A man came to see me," Elena admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "After Michael disappeared, he said Carlos was mistaken about what he'd heard, that repeating such stories could harm his college prospects. There was an envelope with $5,000 for Carlos's education fund." The message was clear. Meanwhile, Amanda sat in her apartment surrounded by old family photographs spread across her coffee table. Images of her father receiving the key to the city, cutting ribbons at park openings, her younger self standing proudly at his side. Richard Wilson, the beloved two-term mayor of Riversend. His career ended prematurely by scandal, not related to missing boys, but a drunk driving incident that had been the final straw for Amanda's mother. Amanda studied his face in the photos, looking for signs of the guilt he must have carried. When had the light in his eyes dimmed? When had the genuine smile become a politician's mask? Was it after Michael's disappearance? Or Thomas Reynolds's before that? She turned her attention to a shoebox her mother had given her years ago, filled with letters and documents she had never fully examined. Inside were her father's personal papers, correspondence notes, and several sealed envelopes marked only with dates. One envelope, dated a week after Michael's disappearance, contained a handwritten note. "Consider the consequences for Amanda if you don't cooperate. The Academy has many hazards for a young cadet." It was unsigned. Amanda's hands trembled as she realized the implication. Her father hadn't willingly participated in the cover-up. He had been blackmailed with threats against his daughter. Against her. Her phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Detective Wilson?" The voice was male, elderly, vaguely familiar. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what's buried beneath the community center foundation. Look at the construction records, not the official ones. Ask for Gregory Mills. He was the foreman." The line went dead. Across town, Lucia had gathered 3 more parents of former team members at a diner on the outskirts of Riversend, away from prying eyes. Though initially reluctant to speak, once one began sharing, the floodgates opened. "They paid us all," admitted Robert Jensen, father of goalkeeper Jason Jensen. "Different amounts, different reasons, but the message was always the same. Forget what your kids might have mentioned about betting or unusual coaching decisions." "Why didn't any of you come forward after Michael disappeared?" Lucia asked, struggling to contain her anger. "Fear," said Patricia Coleman, whose son Tyler had been a defender, "not just of losing the money, but of what might happen to our boys. After Thomas Reynolds vanished and then Michael, we all just wanted to protect our children." Lucia's phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Found something. Meet at Oakview Cemetery in 1 hour. Don't tell anyone." As Lucia drove home to change before meeting Amanda, a sense of unease grew within her. Too many people now knew they were investigating. Too many powerful figures had reasons to stop them. She pulled into her driveway, immediately noticing that her front door was slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she approached cautiously. Inside, the house had been searched. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but on the dining room table, she found Michael's framed jersey, removed from its frame. The red number 10 shirt lay flat on the table, a note placed atop it. "Leave the past buried." The message was clear, a threat, but also confirmation that she and Amanda were getting close to the truth. Someone was frightened enough to break into her home. At the municipal records office, Amanda flashed her badge to gain access to the construction archives. The clerk, a timid man with perpetually ink-stained fingers, led her to the plans for the community center. "Everything looks in order," he assured her, presenting a neatly organized file of permits and inspections. "Too in order," Amanda observed. "No delays, no issues, no change orders. That's not how construction works." The clerk fidgeted uncomfortably. "Well, there was a brief work stoppage during the foundation excavation. It's not in the official record, but..." "But you remember it," Amanda pressed. 2 days, everything halted. Rumors said they hit an old septic tank or something, but they brought in a cement truck at night, poured a new section of foundation, out of sequence with the plans. Amanda photographed the building plans with her phone, paying particular attention to the foundation layout. Certain areas were marked for deeper excavation than others with no apparent structural reason. As the sun began to set, Lucia and Amanda met among the quiet tombstones of Oakview Cemetery. It was neutral ground, unlikely to draw attention, just 2 women paying respects, perhaps to different graves. "Someone broke into my house," Lucia said without preamble. "They left Michael's jersey with a warning to leave the past buried." Amanda nodded grimly. "They're getting nervous. I found irregularities in the community center construction. A section of foundation poured at night, after an unrecorded work stoppage." They walked slowly between the rows of headstones, sharing everything they'd learned from the parents and records. Each new piece of information formed a clearer picture of conspiracy and cover-up, reaching to the highest levels of Riversend's power structure. "My father was being blackmailed," Amanda said quietly. "They threatened me to ensure his cooperation." "That doesn't excuse—" "No, it doesn't," Amanda agreed. "But it explains some things. Why he started drinking. Why he never could look me in the eye afterward." As they rounded a row of newer monuments, an elderly man in gardener's overalls approached, pretending to tend to the flowers on a nearby grave. When he was certain no one else was within earshot, he straightened and faced them. "I heard you're asking about the Community Center Foundation," he said in a low voice. "I worked that construction site. There was an agreement never to speak about what we found when we dug the foundations." José Ramirez led Amanda and Lucia along a narrow dirt path that wound through overgrown brush behind the cemetery. He repeatedly glanced over his shoulder, his weathered face tight with apprehension. The evening had descended into full darkness, making their progress slow and deliberate. "My house is not far," José whispered. "But we must be careful. They have eyes everywhere in this town." The modest dwelling that emerged from the shadows sat on the outskirts of Riversend, a small wooden structure with peeling paint and a chain-link fence separating it from neighboring properties. A lone streetlight cast everything in sickly yellow, including José's nervous expression as he ushered them through his gate. "Quickly," he urged, holding open the door. "The neighbors, they talk." Inside, the small kitchen smelled of chilies and coffee. José immediately drew the blinds before turning to face them. His hands trembled slightly as he retrieved an old metal box from beneath a loose floorboard under the kitchen table. "I was not supposed to have phone at the construction site," he explained, his accent thickening with anxiety. "Company rules. But my daughter was pregnant, due any day. I kept it hidden." From the box, he extracted a dated flip phone, its plastic casing cracked with age. "When we found what we found, I took pictures. Not good quality, but enough." Amanda and Lucia leaned forward as José navigated the phone's primitive interface. The grainy images that appeared on the tiny screen were dark and poorly framed, but unmistakable in their content. Excavated earth, construction materials, and in the center of one frame, human remains partially embedded in soil. "This is what we uncovered when digging the foundation for the East Wing," José said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The foreman, he saw it first, made everyone stop work immediately, called someone on the phone, speaking very quietly." Lucia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes fixed on the image. Though the quality was poor, she could make out fragments of red fabric still clinging to the remains, the same color as Michael's uniform. "What happened after you found this?" Amanda asked, her detective's instincts taking over despite the personal horror of what they were seeing. "Men came. Not regular construction men. Suits like government people. They sent us all home, double pay for the day. When we returned 2 days later, that area was already filled with concrete, poured at night. The foreman said anyone who spoke about what they saw would lose their job. Many of us were undocumented. We could not risk it." José carefully scrolled to another image, a wider angle showing more of the excavation site. "The strange thing was, the concrete they poured was not in the original plans, much thicker than the rest of the foundation. They said it was for, how you say, structural support, but it made no sense for that location." Amanda studied the image intently. "And you're certain this was the East Wing, near the current administrative offices?" José nodded vigorously. Yes. Where the big plaque is now with all the donor names. I helped install that plaque 3 months later." His expression darkened. "The same men who came that day, their names are on that plaque, building a monument over what they buried." "Did you see any identification on these men?" Amanda pressed. "Recognize any of them?" "The mayor was there, not the current one, the one before. Your father," José added, looking at Amanda. "He looked very sick, like he did not want to be there. The others, the judge with the white hair, And the man who is mayor now, Clayton, they did all the talking. Lucia touched the edge of the phone screen, her fingertips hovering over the image, as if she could somehow reach through time and technology to touch her son. Were there other remains? Just one person or more? Jose's eyes filled with reluctant knowledge. More than one. Side by side, like they were placed there together. He hesitated before adding, one was smaller than the other. Thomas Reynolds, Amanda thought. The younger, smaller boy who disappeared first. Jose carefully removed another object from his box, a hand-drawn map of the Community Center Foundation, with X marks showing exactly where the remains had been found and where the special concrete had been poured. I made this after, to remember, in case someday someone would ask the right questions. As Amanda studied the map, a car drove slowly past the house, its headlights sweeping across the drawn blinds. All three froze, holding their breath until the vehicle moved on. They are watching your house, Jose told Amanda. I saw a car, no markings, but police type, parked across from my house earlier today. This is why I approached you in the cemetery. Safer there, with the dead who already know all secrets. Amanda's phone chimed with a notification, a text from her partner at the station. Chief asking where you are. Mayor called twice. Be careful. She showed the message to Lucia. They're getting nervous. We need to move quickly. Jose glanced anxiously toward his window. You should not stay long, for your safety and mine. We need to get these photos and your statement properly documented, Amanda said. Would you be willing to come to the state police headquarters in the morning, bypass Riversend PD entirely? Before Jose could answer, another car approached, this one moving even slower than the last. Through a gap in the blinds, Amanda could see it was an unmarked police cruiser. It stopped directly in front of Jose's house. Back door, Jose whispered urgently, already moving. Through the yard, there's a hole in the fence behind the shed. It leads to the walking trail. Amanda quickly photographed Jose's hand-drawn map with her phone, while Lucia helped the older man gather his evidence. They slipped out the back door, just as a knock sounded at the front. Hidden behind Jose's small garden shed, they watched through a gap in the wooden slats as two men in plain clothes showed badges at Jose's front door. The door remained unanswered, but one officer began circling toward the back of the house. Go now, Jose urged, pressing the old phone into Lucia's hands. Keep this safe. I will tell them you were never here. They'll intimidate you, Amanda warned. Possibly worse. Jose's weathered face showed a lifetime of quietly endured injustices. I have been intimidated by powerful men my whole life, detective. But I could not live with this secret any longer. For 14 years, I have lit candles for those boys, not even knowing their names. It is time for truth. With a final grateful squeeze of Jose's hand, Amanda and Lucia slipped through the broken section of fence and disappeared into the darkness of the wooded trail beyond. They moved swiftly, guided only by the flashlight on Amanda's phone, neither speaking until they were well away from Jose's property. If they find out he helped us, Lucia began. They will, Amanda said grimly. That's why we need to move fast. Get this evidence to people who can't be intimidated by Riversend's power players. They emerged from the trail near a small shopping center on the edge of town. Amanda led them to a 24-hour diner, selecting a booth with a clear view of the door and parking lot. We need a plan, she said, ordering coffee for both of them. Those photos are evidence, but they're not enough for a warrant to excavate the community center. We need more. The workers, Lucia suggested. Jose said others saw the remains too. Could we find them? Possibly, but it would take time we don't have. The construction was 5 years ago, and many were undocumented workers who may have moved on. Amanda's brow furrowed in concentration. We need to force their hand somehow. As they strategized, Amanda noticed a television mounted in the corner of the diner. The local news was playing, and though the sound was muted, the headline crawling across the bottom of the screen made her blood run cold. Breaking. New investigation into Torres' disappearance raises questions about community center construction. "Lucia," she said quietly, nodding toward the screen. The camera cut to footage of Jose's house, police cars parked outside, and Jose himself being escorted to a cruiser, though not in handcuffs. "They're moving faster than we thought," Amanda murmured, quickly throwing money on the table. "We need to get somewhere safe." Back in the car, Amanda made a decision. "We can't go to my apartment or your house. They'll be watching both. We need a place they wouldn't think to look." 40 minutes later, they pulled into the driveway of a small lakeside cabin on the outskirts of the neighboring county. "My grandfather's fishing cabin," Amanda explained. "Nobody knows I still have access to it." Once inside, they spread their evidence across the rustic wooden table. Jose's phone with the photos, his hand-drawn map, the fragments of Michael's uniform, the medallion, and the City Hall badge. "First thing tomorrow, we take all of this to the state police," Amanda said decisively. "Bypass local jurisdiction entirely." Lucia nodded, her gaze fixed on Jose's crude map of the community center foundation. "What will happen to Jose?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "Officially, they can't hold him for long without charges. Unofficially—" She didn't finish the thought. They were interrupted by Amanda's phone ringing, an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered on speaker. "Detective Wilson? It's Gregory Mills." The voice was unfamiliar, middle-aged, tense. "I was the construction foreman for the community center. I heard you've been asking questions." "Mr. Mills," Amanda acknowledged cautiously, "how did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is I know what's under that foundation. And I know they just picked up Jose Ramirez for questioning." His voice lowered. "They're eliminating loose ends, Detective. You and Ms. Torres need to be careful." "Why are you calling me?" "Because I can't live with it anymore. What we found during that excavation. What they made us do." Mills paused, his breathing audible over the line. "Meet me tomorrow morning, 5 a.m. at the community center parking lot, before anyone else arrives. I'll show you something they missed when they cleaned up." The call ended abruptly. Amanda and Lucia exchanged troubled glances. "It could be a trap," Lucia said. "Definitely," Amanda agreed. "But if it's not, if Mills really wants to come clean, it could be the evidence we need." They spent the night in uneasy shifts, one sleeping while the other kept watch. The cabin's isolation, once peaceful, now felt exposed and vulnerable. Every sound from the surrounding woods jolted them to alertness. As dawn approached, they prepared to leave for the meeting with Mills. Amanda checked her service weapon, ensuring it was loaded and ready if needed. "Whatever happens," she told Lucia, "we stay together. And we get justice for Michael and Thomas." They pulled into the empty community center parking lot at 4:55 a.m., the building's silhouette dark against the barely lightening sky. No other cars were visible, no sign of Mills or anyone else. "Let's wait in the car until we see him," Amanda suggested, keeping the engine running for a quick departure if necessary. Minutes ticked by. 5 a.m. came and went. By 5:15, there was still no sign of the foreman. "Something's wrong," Lucia murmured, scanning the shadows surrounding the building. Just as Amanda was about to suggest leaving, her phone pinged with a news alert. "Construction foreman Gregory Mills found dead in apparent suicide. Left note claiming responsibility for irregularities in community center construction." Between the tombstones, an elderly gardener approached them discreetly and murmured, "I worked on the construction of the center. There was an agreement to never talk about what we found when we dug the foundations." Lucia stared at Robert Parker seated in her living room, his once authoritative posture now diminished with age. His hands trembled as they clutched a sealed manila envelope, his gaze repeatedly drifting to Michael's number 10 jersey. Amanda stood near the doorway, her phone discreetly recording their unexpected visitor's every word. "Why are you here, Mr. Parker?" Amanda asked, her tone carefully, balanced between professional detachment and barely contained anger. The former school principal had vanished from Riversend shortly after Michael's disappearance, allegedly to take a position at a private academy in Oregon. His sudden return, especially after Gregory Mills's suspicious suicide, could not be coincidental. "Because I've been carrying this for 14 years, Parker replied, his voice cracking. "My wife's death 3 months ago. It changed things. She was the one they threatened if I ever spoke up." Lucia leaned forward, studying the man who had once called her with practiced sympathy after Michael vanished. "So you've come to finally tell us the truth? After 14 years of silence?" Parker's eyes darted to the window before returning to Lucia. "I never wanted any part in what happened. You have to believe that." "What I believe," Amanda interjected, "is that you were part of a conspiracy that covered up the deaths of 2 boys. What I need now are facts, Mr. Parker." The old man nodded, resignation settling over his features. It started small, just a few friendly wagers between parents at games. Then Vincent Clayton got involved. "The current mayor," Lucia clarified, though they all knew who Clayton was. "He was just a real estate developer then, but always ambitious. He saw potential in organizing the betting more professionally." Parker's gaze drifted to a framed photo of Michael on the mantel. "One day during his study hall, Michael came to my office, said he needed to talk about Coach Whitaker." Lucia's breath caught. "What did he tell you?" A flash of memory crossed Parker's face. He had found spreadsheets in Whitaker's office, detailed records of bets, player performances, game outcomes. Michael was smart, connected the dots quickly. He threatened to take what he found to the school board, to the police. "And you stopped him," Amanda said flatly. "I told him I would handle it," Parker admitted, shame evident in his slumped shoulders. "I promised to investigate his claims. What I actually did was call Clayton immediately." "Why Clayton and not the police?" Amanda pressed. "Because I was already in too deep," Parker confessed. "I'd placed bets myself in the beginning. Small amounts, but enough to implicate me. Clayton reminded me of that, told me to send Michael to Whitaker after practice to discuss what he'd found." Lucia felt physically ill. "You sent my son to his death." Parker couldn't meet her eyes. "I never thought. I believed they would just scare him, maybe offer him money to stay quiet. When I heard what had happened in the locker room, I wanted to go to the police. But by then they had pictures of me at betting meetings, records of my wagers, and they made it clear my wife would suffer if I talked. So instead, you helped bury a child and destroy his mother's life," Amanda said, disgust evident in her voice. Parker's hands shook more violently as he placed the envelope on the coffee table. "These are records I kept. Transfer receipts, dates, names. After Michael, Clayton, and Judge Devlin took over the betting operation completely, they made it more sophisticated, brought in connections from Las Vegas." Amanda picked up the envelope, examining its sealed edges. "And Thomas Reynolds? What happened to him?" Parker's expression darkened further. "Thomas discovered the betting scheme before Michael did. But instead of coming forward, he tried to blackmail Clayton and some of the others. They decided to make an example of him." "They murdered a child over gambling debts?" Lucia's voice rose in horror. "It wasn't just gambling by then," Parker explained. "The money involved had attracted more dangerous elements. Thomas threatened exposure at a time when they were expanding operations to other districts. They couldn't risk it." As Amanda began to ask another question, the sound of a camera shutter clicked outside the window. All three turned to see a figure ducking away from the glass. "Stay here," Amanda ordered, drawing her weapon and moving swiftly to the door. Outside, Amanda confronted a middle-aged man with a professional camera, press credentials hanging around his neck. He raised his hands defensively as she approached. "Freedom of the press!" he shouted as Amanda physically disarmed him of his camera. "This is police brutality." "This is trespassing and interfering with an active investigation," she countered, securing his wrists with zip ties. "How did you know to be here tonight?" "Got a tip," the reporter replied with a smirk. "Said the former principal was making a house call to the Torres woman. My editor said to get photos or don't come back." After confiscating his memory cards and securing him in her car to await transport, Amanda returned to find Lucia standing over Parker, her expression thunderous. "He claims Vincent Clayton personally moved Michael's remains 5 years after the murder," Lucia said, her voice tight with rage. "When they began construction on the community center." Parker looked up at Amanda, his face ashen. "Clayton said it was too risky to leave the bodies where they were. The construction gave them perfect cover to relocate the remains to somewhere more permanent. Under the foundation of the community center itself," Amanda finished, recalling Jose's photographs. "Buried under concrete and commemorative plaques bearing the names of their killers." Parker nodded miserably. The ultimate hiding place. Who would ever authorize tearing up $1 million community center on a hunch? Amanda examined the documents from Parker's envelope, bank statements showing suspicious transfers to his account after Michael's disappearance, a life insurance policy taken out on his wife with Clayton as the secondary beneficiary, emails with veiled threats. "These implicate Clayton, Devlin, and at least 3 other prominent community members," she noted, methodically photographing each document with her phone. "And indirectly, my father." Parker's gaze shifted to her. "Your father was blackmailed into cooperation, Detective. They threatened you specifically. I was present when Clayton made the call to Mayor Wilson, telling him what would happen to his daughter at the police academy if he didn't help redirect the investigation." Amanda felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that her father hadn't willingly participated, anger that he hadn't found the courage to resist despite the threats, grief for the years of estrangement that resulted. "None of that excuses what happened," she said firmly. "No," Parker agreed. "Nothing does." Lucia, who had been studying the former principal's face carefully, suddenly asked, "Why now? Why come forward after all this time knowing what it might cost you?" Parker gestured to the window where the reporter had been. "Because it's already coming apart. Mills's death was no suicide. It was a warning to the rest of us. I'm next on their list, I'm certain of it. At least this way, my confession might mean something." "We need to get you to the state police," Amanda decided. "Today, your testimony, combined with these documents and Jose Ramirez's photographs, might be enough for search warrants." A notification on Amanda's phone caught her attention. A live news report was beginning. She turned up the volume to hear the anchor's somber voice. "Breaking news in the Michael Torres cold case. Sources close to the investigation report that new evidence may connect the 14-year-old disappearance to the construction of the Riversend Community Center. Mayor Vincent Clayton has called a press conference for tomorrow morning to address what he terms irresponsible speculation." The camera cut to footage of police cars outside Jose Ramirez's home. The elderly man was being escorted to a cruiser, his face a mask of dignified resignation. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Amanda said. "Parker, you need to come with us now." As they gathered the evidence and prepared to leave, Parker paused at the door. "There's something else you should know. Gregory Mills didn't just leave a suicide note. He left a map, detailed schematics of exactly where they placed the bodies under the foundation. That's why they killed him so quickly." "Where's the map now?" Amanda asked urgently. "If he was smart, he would have hidden it somewhere they wouldn't think to look. Mills was a military veteran, served in Desert Storm. He used to talk about how soldiers would hide crucial information in plain sight." Lucia, already on the threshold, paused. "The memorial wall," she whispered. "The community center has a veterans memorial wall where they display military memorabilia donated by local veterans." Parker's eyes widened. "If I were hiding something in that building, that's exactly where I'd put it." They moved quickly to Amanda's car, where the restrained reporter watched them with narrowed eyes from the back seat. "I'll call for another unit to pick him up," Amanda said, nodding toward the reporter. "We need to get Parker to safety and then check that memorial wall." As they pulled away from Lucia's house, a black SUV with tinted windows turned onto her street, driving slowly past her driveway. Amanda noted the government issue plates, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "They're watching both our houses," she told Lucia. "We can't go back until this is over." Parker hunched down in the back seat as if trying to make himself invisible. "If they find out I'm with you, they'll move the bodies again. They own enough people to get access to the center at any time." "Then we need to get to that memorial wall tonight," Lucia decided, her determination hardening into resolve. "Before Clayton's press conference tomorrow." As they drove toward the state police headquarters to secure Parker's official statement, the radio news update crackled through the car speakers. In a shocking development, former Riversend High School Principal Robert Parker was reported missing by his caretaker this evening. Parker, who suffers from early-stage dementia, wandered away from his assisted living facility. Authorities are concerned for his safety given tonight's forecast of severe thunderstorms. Parker's face went pale. "I don't have dementia. I don't even have a caretaker. That facility has never been my home." "They're setting the stage," Amanda realized. "If we take you to the state police now, they'll say I'm a confused old man making up stories," Parker finished, his voice hollow. "And if something happens to me afterward, it will just be a tragic case of a disoriented senior meeting with an accident." While watching a news broadcast together in Lucia's home, the transmission was suddenly interrupted by breaking news. Minutes ago, a major fire was reported at the Memorial Sports Center, destroying primarily the records area and the original foundation of the building. The community center blazed against the night sky, orange flames licking upward as black smoke billowed into the darkness. From their vantage point in Amanda's car, parked on a hill overlooking the scene, Lucia and Amanda watched in stunned silence as firefighters battled the inferno. Emergency lights cast eerie red and blue patterns across the gathered crowd of onlookers, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. "They're destroying evidence," Amanda said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "They'd rather burn down a community landmark than let the truth come out." Lucia couldn't tear her eyes away from the fire. Somewhere within those flames lay the remains of her son, evidence of his final resting place, now potentially lost forever in the conflagration. Her hands trembled in her lap as she spoke. "We need to get closer." Amanda hesitated, scanning the perimeter of emergency vehicles. "It's risky. Clayton's people will be watching." "My son is in there," Lucia replied, her voice breaking slightly. "I need to see what's happening." With a nod, Amanda started the car. They circled around to a service road that ran behind the community center, parking amid a cluster of maintenance vehicles. The stench of burning materials grew stronger as they approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. "There," Lucia whispered, pointing to a young firefighter who stood slightly apart from the others, directing a hose toward the eastern wing of the building. "I recognize him. That's Diego Ramirez, Jose's nephew." Amanda nodded. "Wait here." She approached the firefighter cautiously, showing her badge when he turned. They conversed briefly before he glanced around and gestured for Lucia to join them. "Mrs. Torres," Diego acknowledged, his expression grim beneath his helmet. "My uncle told me what's happening. This fire, it's not accidental." "We figured as much," Amanda replied. "How bad is it?" Diego lowered his voice. "Multiple ignition points, all concentrated in the records room and the Eastern Foundation area. He glanced meaningfully at both women. Exactly where my uncle said the remains would be. Is there any way we can get closer? Lucia asked, her eyes drawn to the flames engulfing what might be her son's tomb. Diego hesitated before nodding. Follow me, stay behind, and if anyone asks, you're with the fire marshal's office. He led them along the perimeter, past the cordoned-off area where police kept onlookers at bay. With practiced ease, he guided them to a side entrance that remained relatively untouched by the flames. This leads to the maintenance tunnels under the east wing, he explained, unlocking the door with his emergency key. The fire hasn't reached this area yet, but the smoke will be intense. Take these. He handed them each a spare breathing apparatus. As they moved through the dimly lit corridor, the heat intensified. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, and the roar of the fire grew louder above them. Diego stopped at a junction, pointing to a section of exposed concrete on the tunnel ceiling. That's part of the foundation for the East Wing, he explained. The same area my uncle photographed during construction. The fire started directly above this spot. Amanda examined the concrete closely, running her fingers along a section that appeared different from the surrounding material. Newer, perhaps, or poured separately. They're burning the building to hide what's in the foundation, she concluded grimly. Once the fire's out, they'll claim the structure is too dangerous and push for immediate demolition. The evidence will be hauled away to a landfill before anyone can examine it. Through the breathing apparatus, Lucia's voice sounded hollow but determined. We need to document this now, before it's too late. Amanda was already taking photos with her phone, capturing the distinctive pattern of the concrete and its location relative to identifiable markers. Diego stood watch at the tunnel junction, occasionally checking his radio for updates on the fire's progress. Chiefs ordered full evacuation of the building, he reported tensely. Structural integrity compromised in the East Wing. We don't have much time. A noise from further down the tunnel caught their attention. Footsteps approaching. Diego motioned for them to step back into a utility alcove. Fire department, a voice called out. Anyone down here? Diego stepped forward. Ramirez here, sir. Just checking the maintenance tunnels before final evacuation. The beam of a powerful flashlight swept across them, revealing the fire chief's stern face. His eyes narrowed when he spotted Amanda and Lucia. Who authorized civilians in the hot zone? He demanded. Before Diego could answer, Amanda stepped forward with her badge. Detective Wilson, Riversend PD. We're documenting potential evidence related to an ongoing investigation. The chief's expression hardened. Mayor Clayton specifically instructed that all personnel except firefighters were to be kept out of the building. Especially you, Detective Wilson. Did he now? Amanda replied, her voice dangerously calm. And since when does the mayor dictate fire department procedures during an active emergency? A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the chief's radio. Finally, he gestured toward the exit. You have 2 minutes to clear out before I report this. That's all I can give you. As he turned to leave, Lucia called after him. Chief, did the fire start in the foundation area specifically? He paused, looking back at her with an unreadable expression. Multiple ignition points, professional job, all concentrated in areas that had been excavated recently. At her questioning look, he added, Someone was searching for something before they set the fire. After he departed, Diego led them deeper into the tunnel system. There's a maintenance hatch that will give us access to the foundation itself, he explained. It was installed during construction for periodic structural inspections. The hatch, when they reached it, opened into a narrow crawl space between the concrete foundation and the building's subfloor. Diego handed Amanda a powerful flashlight. I can't go further. My gear won't fit, but you might be able to see something. Amanda squeezed through the opening first, Lucia following close behind. The beam of the flashlight cut through the dusty darkness, revealing pipes, electrical conduits, and the massive concrete foundation. "There," Lucia whispered, pointing to a section of the foundation that appeared distinctly different. Newer concrete, with a slightly different coloration. "That must be it." Amanda directed her light along the seam where the newer concrete met the original foundation. Something caught the light. A small metallic object, partially embedded in the edge of the concrete. "What is that?" Lucia asked, moving closer. Amanda carefully extracted the object with her pocket knife. A small fragment of red fabric with a white number visible, the top curve of what might have been a 0 or a 6. "Michael's jersey," Lucia breathed, taking the fragment with trembling fingers. They missed this when they poured the concrete. A sudden cracking sound above them sent dust raining down. Diego's urgent voice called through the hatch. "You need to get out now. The structure's compromising." They scrambled back through the hatch just as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Diego hurried them through the tunnels, the building groaning ominously around them. They emerged into the night air as another section of the community center's roof caved in, sending a plume of sparks into the sky. The crowd of onlookers gasped collectively at the spectacular destruction. Among the gathered officials, Lucia spotted Mayor Clayton standing beside Chief Matthews, both men watching the fire with expressions that might have seemed appropriately concerned to anyone who didn't know better. When Clayton's gaze drifted in their direction, Amanda pulled Lucia deeper into the crowd. "We need to get somewhere safe," she murmured. "They'll have noticed we were here." As they made their way back to Amanda's car, a young reporter intercepted them, thrusting a microphone toward Lucia. "Mrs. Torres, Channel 4 News. Is it true that the remains of your son Michael might have been buried beneath the community center?" Before Lucia could respond, more reporters swarmed around them, cameras flashing, questions overlapping into a cacophony of demand. "Detective Wilson, has the department reopened the Torres case? Is there any connection between this fire and Gregory Mills' suicide? Do you believe city officials were involved in a cover-up?" Amanda pushed through the throng, shielding Lucia as best she could until they reached her car. Once inside, doors locked, they sat in momentary silence, processing what had just happened. "The national news vans are already here," Amanda observed, watching as a satellite truck with a major network logo pulled into the parking lot. "This isn't just a local story anymore." Lucia clutched the small fragment of red fabric, her one tangible connection to her son amid the chaos. "What do we do now? The evidence is burning before our eyes." Amanda started the car, pulling away from the community center. "Not all of it. We still have Jose's photos, Parker's documents, and now this fabric fragment. Plus, the fire itself is evidence. They wouldn't have torched the building if they weren't desperate to hide something." "Where are we going?" Lucia asked, noticing they weren't heading toward either of their homes. "State Police Headquarters in Carlson County, outside Riversend jurisdiction. Parker is already there giving his statement." She glanced at her watch. "If we hurry, we can make the morning news cycle before Clayton's press conference." As they drove through the night, Lucia's phone continuously lit up with notifications, social media exploding with theories about the fire, news updates, messages from friends and neighbors. One text caught her attention, from Elena Martinez. "They came for Jose after the fire started, took him to the station. Carlos is flying in from Seattle tonight. We're ready to talk publicly." Lucia showed Amanda the message. "The wall of silence is crumbling." Amanda nodded grimly. "People are choosing sides, those who want the truth versus those who've profited from burying it." By dawn, they reached the state police headquarters, a modern building set back from the highway. Inside, they were immediately escorted to a conference room where Robert Parker sat with 2 state investigators, his statement nearly complete. "Mrs. Torres," Parker acknowledged, his expression both relieved and apprehensive. They've been very thorough. I've told them everything. The lead investigator, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, turned to Amanda. Detective Wilson, we've just received confirmation that the state attorney general is authorizing an emergency excavation order for what remains of the community center foundation after the fire is fully extinguished and the structure stabilized. How long will that take? Lucia asked. Days, possibly weeks, the investigator replied. But this time, no one from Riversend government will be overseeing the process. As morning broke fully, they gathered around a television in the conference room to watch the first news reports about the fire. The anchor's solemn voice narrated over footage of the still smoldering community center. Dramatic developments overnight in Riversend, where a suspicious fire devastated the community center amid allegations that it may have been built over the remains of 2 missing boys. Sources close to the investigation suggest the fire may have been set to destroy evidence related to the 14-year-old disappearance of Michael Torres and 16-year-old Thomas Reynolds. The camera cut to a reporter standing before the ruined building, now a skeletal structure of blackened beams and collapsed walls. Behind me, state forensic teams are preparing to examine what remains of the foundation once firefighters declare the scene safe. Meanwhile, Mayor Vincent Clayton has called an emergency press conference for 9 a.m., though his office has not commented on reports that former school principal Robert Parker has come forward with allegations of a cover-up involving city officials. The following morning, the front page of the newspaper featured a historical photograph from the community center's ribbon-cutting ceremony 5 years earlier. Clayton and Judge Devlin stood prominently at the center, smiling as they cut the ceremonial red ribbon. And in the corner of the image, almost unnoticed, stood Gregory Mills, the construction foreman, staring down at the floor beneath his feet with a tortured expression. The morning sun cast long shadows across the excavation site that had once been the Riversend Community Center. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, surrounding the ruins as forensic technicians in white coveralls methodically sifted through the debris. A tent had been erected over the eastern portion of the foundation, shielding a particular area from both the elements and prying eyes. Lucia stood at the perimeter, watching the careful operation unfold. 3 weeks had passed since the fire. 3 weeks of waiting as the authorities meticulously documented and preserved every piece of evidence. She had come here every day, a silent sentinel observing the slow unearthing of the truth that had been buried for 14 years. Amanda approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. State forensics team says they're almost ready, she said, handing one of the cups to Lucia. They wanted to make sure everything was properly documented before disturbing the primary site. Lucia nodded, her gaze never leaving the tent. I always knew I'd find him eventually, she said quietly. I just never imagined it would be like this. Rain had fallen intermittently over the past weeks, turning the ground around the excavation to mud. It reminded Lucia of that night when Whitaker had appeared on her doorstep, setting in motion the chain of events that had led them here. That seemed a lifetime ago now. The lead forensic investigator emerged from the tent and made her way over to them, removing her gloves as she approached. Mrs. Torres, Detective Wilson, she acknowledged, her expression professionally composed, yet gentle. We're ready if you'd like to come in. Amanda placed a supportive hand on Lucia's back as they followed the investigator into the tent. Inside, a section of concrete had been carefully cut away, revealing what lay beneath. 2 sets of remains rested side by side in the exposed earth, each treated with the dignity they had been denied for so long. Lucia's knees threatened to buckle at the sight, but she forced herself to remain upright. This moment required her strength, her witness. We've positively identified the remains, the investigator explained softly. DNA confirms these are Michael Torres and Thomas Reynolds. Though Lucia had known this confirmation was coming, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a wave of emotion through her that was both devastating and, strangely, relieving. The not knowing had finally ended. "Can you tell?" Lucia hesitated, unsure if she truly wanted the answer. "Can you tell how they died?" The investigator nodded solemnly. Thomas Reynolds sustained a severe trauma to the back of the skull, consistent with blunt force. Michael... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Michael's injuries align with Whitaker's account of a fall against a locker room bench. A single, fatal head injury. Amanda squeezed Lucia's shoulder gently. Was there any indication of other trauma? "No," the investigator replied. "No signs of prolonged suffering or additional injuries." A small mercy in an ocean of cruelty, Lucia thought. "We found these with Michael's remains," the investigator added, indicating a sealed evidence bag containing the tarnished Saint Sebastian medallion and fragments of the red jersey. "They'll be returned to you once the investigation is complete." Lucia nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you for treating them with respect," she managed to say. Outside the tent, media vans lined the street, kept at a distance by state troopers. The discovery had become national news, the story of 2 boys buried beneath a community center igniting outrage across the country. Each day brought new revelations as the conspirators' wall of silence crumbled. Vincent Clayton, Judge Devlin, and 3 other prominent community members had been arrested the previous week, charged with a litany of crimes ranging from obstruction of justice to accessory to murder. Chief Matthews had resigned in disgrace when his role in the cover-up became clear. Whitaker remained in custody, his cooperation ensuring a lesser sentence, but not absolution. As Lucia and Amanda emerged from the tent, they saw a familiar figure waiting at the perimeter. Richard Wilson, Amanda's father, looking frail and diminished in the morning light. "I'll just be a minute," Amanda said to Lucia, moving toward her father with visible hesitation. Lucia watched their reunion from a distance, observing how the former mayor seemed to shrink further as he spoke to his daughter. Whatever confession or explanation he offered, Amanda's posture remained rigid, though she eventually accepted the envelope he handed her. When Amanda returned, her expression was complex. Hurt and anger mingled with a tentative relief. "He brought records," she explained, tucking the envelope into her jacket. "Documentation of the threats made against me to ensure his silence. He's agreed to testify against Clayton and the others." "Does that help?" Lucia asked softly. Amanda shook her head slightly. "I don't know. Maybe someday." She glanced back at her father, who stood watching them with the lost expression of a man facing the ruins of his life. The truth was always going to hurt, no matter when it came out. The recovery and formal identification of the remains brought a grim certainty to what they had already known, but it also opened the path to proper mourning. After 14 years in limbo, Lucia could finally plan a funeral for her son. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, the community gathered at the site of the old soccer field. The charred remnants of the community center had been completely removed, the land reclaimed and transformed. Fresh sod covered what had once been a foundation built on secrets, and the old oak tree, which had stood silent witness for so long, had been carefully preserved. A new fence surrounded the field, and at its entrance stood a stone memorial, bearing the photographs of Michael Torres and Thomas Reynolds, their young faces preserved in granite, forever, 13 and 15. Lucia stood beside Amanda as Mayor Harriet Chen, Riversend's first female mayor, elected in the special election following Clayton's removal, addressed the assembled crowd. "Today we dedicate this field to the memory of Michael Torres and Thomas Reynolds," Mayor Chen announced. "Their lives were cut short by unimaginable cruelty and betrayal. The trust of this community was similarly violated by those who sought to bury the truth alongside these young men." The crowd included many familiar faces: Elena Martinez and her son Carlos, now a youth soccer coach; Jose Ramirez, whose courage had helped break the case open, the parents of other players from Michael's team, no longer bound by fear or payoffs. Robert Parker sat in the front row, his testimony having been instrumental in bringing the conspirators to justice. His cooperation had earned him immunity from prosecution, though the burden of his complicity would remain with him always. This field will stand as both memorial and reminder, Mayor Chen continued. A place for future generations to play the game these boys loved, but also a testament to our commitment that such betrayals will never again be tolerated in Riversend. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Lucia and Amanda remained, watching as a group of children tentatively approached the field, soccer ball in hand. With respectful glances toward the memorial, they began to play, their voices bringing life back to a place that had known too much death. Wilson Sr., looking more aged than his years, but with a newfound clarity in his eyes, approached them cautiously. "The field looks good," he observed, his hands thrust deep in his pockets. "They did a nice job." Amanda nodded, the frost in her manner toward her father having thawed somewhat over the past months. "It's what Michael and Thomas deserve." "I've been thinking about retiring to Arizona," Wilson Sr. said after a moment, "but I wanted to see this first, to see them properly honored." Lucia studied the man who had once been mayor, whose weakness had contributed to her years of uncertainty and pain. But she also saw Amanda's father, a man who had made terrible choices under threat to his daughter's safety. "The truth has a way of finding light," Lucia said, "no matter how deeply it's buried." Wilson Sr. nodded, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry it took so long." With a final glance at his daughter, he walked away, shoulders bent under the weight of regret. Amanda watched him go, her expression softening slightly. "He's been sober for 4 months now. It's something, at least." "Healing takes time," Lucia replied. "For everyone." They moved closer to the memorial, where Michael and Thomas smiled from their photographs, eternally young. A plaque beneath read, "Field Michael Torres and Thomas Reynolds, that we never forget." "I'm establishing a foundation," Lucia told Amanda, "for young athletes at risk. Scholarships, mentoring, advocacy when they face pressure or exploitation." Amanda smiled. Michael would be proud. "It gives his life meaning beyond how it ended," Lucia said, touching the cool stone of the memorial. "Both their lives." As the day waned, most visitors departed, leaving Lucia for a final moment alone with her son's memory. She hadn't brought his framed jersey, that now hung in a special display at the field house, alongside the story of how truth had finally prevailed. The young players had finished their game and were packing up their gear, respectfully quiet as they passed the memorial. One boy paused, looking at the photographs with curiosity. "Were they good players?" he asked Lucia. "The best," she replied with a sad smile. "Michael wore number 10. The boy nodded seriously. "My coach says we're never giving out number 10 at our club. He says it's reserved." "That's nice," Lucia said, touched by the gesture. "He says some players never really leave the field," the boy continued, adjusting his own jersey, before running to catch up with his friends. Lucia remained a moment longer, watching as the evening sunlight cast long shadows across the fresh grass. A gentle breeze touched her face, and for the first time in 14 years, she felt a sense of peace settle over her heart. She turned to leave, feeling Michael's presence not in the granite memorial or the hallowed ground, but in the laughter of children playing the game he had loved. As she walked away from the field, Lucia noticed that the young soccer players had left the number 10 jersey hanging respectfully on the memorial. Because some players, she thought as a gentle breeze touched her face, never really leave the field.